between Road Rash 2 and Road Rash 3, the Panasonic 3DO would get its own Road Rash game, and it was simply entitled Road Rash. It was released on the system in January of 1994 in North America, and would eventually release in Japan in August of that year. Fast forward 1 year later, after the release of Road Rash 3, Road Rash 3DO was ported to the PlayStation on the 29th of December of 1995, and would eventually see its release in Japan and Europe of March 1996. This port of the game was also released on the Sega Saturn and Windows PC, but for this review I'll be covering the PlayStation version. I had never heard of this version of Road Rash until 2 decades later when a friend of mine showed it to me for his PlayStation 1. It took me by surprise, as I thought I was already aware of Road Rash on the PlayStation in the form of Road Rash 3D and Road Rash Jailbreak, but it was this version that arrived before any of the latter two titles were even developed. It was only in 2016 that I decided to buy a copy of this game. And being the smart European gamer that I am, I went for the NTSC version, as our PAL versions were mostly unoptimised, so I go for the 60Hz route. Also, I never saw these boxes before. Apparently these are the very first kinds of boxes that the PlayStation games were released in, before they went for the typical jewel case that we're used to seeing more often. Personally, I wish they stuck with this design, as I'm all about presentation, and the manuals were nice to look at as well. I'm going to refer to this version as Road Rash 95, as it's going to be pretty difficult saying Road Rash if I'm not talking about the original. So let's get started with this episode of Classix Review by taking a look at Road Rash 95 for the PlayStation 1. The first thing that got my attention was the introduction of live action cutscenes. Personally, I thought they were not as enjoyable as the storyboard style cutscenes that were seen in Road Rash 2 and 3, but I suppose this is a new generation of games at the time. With CD based games being created, it was only natural for EA to include them. The biggest drawback of these cutscenes for me was how detached they felt. I know in Road Rash 2 and 3 they were cartoons and only shown from a storyboard perspective, but at least I knew exactly which character was supposed to be me. I'll get into that in just a few minutes though, as I want to get into the gameplay aspect of this installment first. Road Rash 95 plays just like the original games that were on the Mega Drive, with only very few differences. In terms of combat, I found it much easier to hit my opponents, and I was also impressed that they increased the frame rate dramatically in comparison to the previous entries. Gone are the sluggish 12 frames per second PowerPoint presentation that was seen in the Mega Drive counterpart, replaced with up to 30 frames per second on this installment. Note I said up to, as there were only a few moments where the game would actually reach the cap of 30 frames per second, as it mostly plays at around 20 to 24. Now, I don't know if that's a hardware issue specific to the console, or if it's just how the game runs across the board, as I haven't played any other version of this game except on PlayStation 1. But in any case, it's a massive improvement over what we had in the Mega Drive version, so I'll take it anyway. I'm not going to get all techie about it though, so I won't stay talking about the frames per second or anything like that. I just thought it was nice to experience a smoother Road Rash game than what I was used to all these years. From the main menu there are two game modes to choose from. There is Big Game Mode, which serves as the traditional game mode we've all played previously. Stripped away from this version is the ability to input your own username, and instead you have a choice of 8 characters to choose from, all of which have their own bike, amount of cash and personalities. Once you've chosen a character, you are then given the option to enter a hub area known as Der Panzer Club. I don't know why they called it that. I don't see why Clubhouse didn't suffice, but I digress. There is also Ollie's Scooterama, which in English means bike shop. This is where you can purchase better bikes and help you gain a foothold in harder races. In the Clubhouse menu, you're given the option to either schmooze, which basically means to interact with other bikers in the room through a text box, similar to what we saw in the original Road Rash games before starting a race. This is usually done to show hints and tips for upcoming races, but personally I have not found them to be any way game changing. More stupid names, as we also have Restroom, which is your options menu, and Bulletin Board, which is where you choose your next race. The Street simply means to back out of the previous menu. Let me just point out that I was so confused navigating these menus because of their very out there names. I mean, why schmooze, restroom, bulletin board in the street? Why not just interact, options, race and exit respectively? Der Panzer Club and Scooterama. Honestly, if you stop to take a look at everything that's going on within the confines of this game menu, you'd swear you were on kilograms of LSD. Granted, it does give the game its own charm and sense of character, but it's kinda creepy, don't you think? Anyway, let's jump into some races. You have a choice of 5 locations to choose from. Some of them are very similar to the locations that were in the original installment, but only by name. As I mentioned earlier, the game runs between 20 and 30 frames per second, so it makes for a much faster paced style of Road Rash here, a definite sense of speed. I also mentioned how easy it was to hit my opponents. Unfortunately, it's not the only thing that's easy here. Throughout level 1, I was able to obtain first place in every race before levelling up and actually needing to buy a better bike. There was no need to spend a penny. It's only in level 2 where the game really picks up in difficulty. The police make their return in this installment, but with only one problem. They are pushovers. I swear I have never had such a simple time bypassing a police bike on any other version of Road Rash. At least on the Mega Drive they actually tried, whereas in this game they're no bigger obstacle than that of another car. I didn't even get busted while recording any of this footage, not once. Your opponents are more aggressive, and oh boy are they aggressive. One thing I really like about this game is, at least at level 2 and onwards, your opponents actually make a hard effort to knock you off of your bike. Because hitting someone is much more fast paced, I actually made every attempt necessary to try avoiding some of the bikers because of how unpredictable they were. It made for a very intense couple of seconds on more than one occasion, and I found it very enjoyable to say the least. There was also the inclusion of more obstacles in the road, including more traffic, oil spills and pedestrians. Yeah, for some reason people like to stand in the middle of the road in this game, rather than on the pavement. This counts as a credible obstacle in EA's books. Fair enough. You'll also come across forks in the road that allow you to take different routes as you race. I'm more of the impression that one side is easy and the opposite side is more of a challenge, but I really couldn't tell while I was playing. As was in the other games, coming between first and third place means you have qualified, and if you qualify on all locations, you move up to the next level. Unfortunately, it did not take any pages from Road Rash 2's book, as you are stuck racing the same locations on every level. There is no swap out like we saw in Road Rash 2 and 3, so it will become a little bit repetitive. The only difference is the races get longer as the levels go up, and as a result the road becomes more of a hazardous environment. I was only ever able to see the wrecked screen once, and it was from a very hilarious collision and one that cost me my game over screen, as I had no funds to repair my bike. I flew over a barricade down a cliff and the game probably lost sight of my character's sprite and didn't bother to read me back in, so instead I got wrecked and had to quit from the game. And that's pretty much the beef of Big Game Mode. The other game mode is Thrash Mode, which is just an exhibition mode. You simply pick a track, a level and race. There's nothing more to it. This is the first Road Rash game to incorporate the motion captured sprites that would eventually make its way to Road Rash 3, replacing the cartoon-esque sprites that we saw in Road Rash 1 and 2. The only difference with this installment is the level of detail in the stages themselves. Granted, this is a very early PS1 game, so the graphics will probably look ugly by today's standards, especially when you compare it to games that came out around the same time, such as Ridge Racer. But jumping from the Mega Drive to this must have been crazy to see back then. Overall, it isn't really that aesthetically pleasing to look at. But I suppose the only excuse I can use in its defence is the fact that you're driving at speed, which means you'll probably be ignorant of any standout pixels at all. Another Road Rash game, another instalment with horrendous motorbike engines. Okay, that was probably a little bit too harsh, as it doesn't sound anywhere near as bad as it does in the Mega Drive installments. While they do sound a little better this time around, I still couldn't help but turn it off in favour of the game's music. And the music in this game is reasonable, if I have to say anything positive at all. It's not a huge gripe. Aside from the licensed music we hear on the game's intro and main menu, the in-game music was rather forgettable in my books. I don't know, maybe I'm holding on too tightly to the original Road Rash's soundtrack and being biased about it, but there was probably only one track on this game that I really enjoyed, and that's not saying too much if I'm honest. In conclusion, I thought Road Rash 95 was fairly enjoyable. While it does have a lot of character, there doesn't seem to be much meat to it. I much prefer the original trilogy on the Mega Drive, but that could well be nostalgia coming into it. Maybe I'm too late to play this version and truly enjoy it, but then again, I have jumped into 20+ year old games and still come away amazed and satisfied at them, so I really don't quite know what it is that I don't 100% like about this game. It's a good Road Rash game, I'll give it that. But if I were to rank it amongst the original 3 games on the Mega Drive, I would put this at the bottom of the list. This is all before I decide to play and review the other 2 installments that came out. Whenever that may be, I don't know, but I have to base it on what I have fully experienced. And so far, after fully experiencing Road Rash 1, 2, 3 and 95 on the PlayStation 1, I have to say this installment is the weakest. That said, I'm not saying it's outright crap. There are plenty of people out there who probably disagree with me. I have no doubt. But as it stands, I just can't see myself liking this one as much as the other entries. Maybe it's nostalgia getting the better of me, like I said. Maybe I'm biased to the ones I grew up with. I really don't know what to feel about it. It's good, but it's not great. And that's pretty much as good as a review as it's going to get for me, so thanks for taking the time to watch it. This has been Gamerboy talking to you on GB Gaming, where video games comes first. Thanks again, leave a comment, a like or subscribe if you wish, and I'll see you on the next video. Have a good one.